Welcome from the bowels of hell.
The Dana Gould Hour.
Jungle worms and swamp rats run around your feet.
I bought a dog that killed the calf, that ate the canary. What is truth?
And once again, welcome back.
Hello, and welcome to the Dana Gould Hour Podcast. We are in high dudgeon of the holiday season, and we have an episode that, we hope, will stuff your stocking with candy-coated oral enticements. We have two great guests joining us from the Ologies podcast, as well as CBS's Henry Ford's Innovation Nation with Mo Rocca. Alie Ward is here to discuss all things ologistic. And we have a year-end recap with our film critic in residence, Katharine Coldiron. We will be discussing the year in film, the year in streaming, and the year in streaming film. True Tales From Weirdsville will take a deep dive into the world of the late, great, brilliant but haunted Peter Sellers, specifically his barely released 1973 film Ghost in the Noonday Sun, which is the subject of the compelling making-of documentary The Ghost of Peter Sellers. Two things I wanted to tell you about if you live in Southern California. I will be part of a very special event on December 11th of this year. That is Mila Nurmi's 100th birthday celebration. Mila, better known to the world as Vampira, passed in 2008, but we are celebrating her centenary, as they say, with a full day of events. At 7 p.m., we will be showing a beautiful 35mm print of Tim Burton's classic Ed Wood at the American Cinematheque Los Feliz 3 Theater, located right here on Vermont Avenue in beautiful Los Angeles, California. After the film, I will be moderating a panel featuring Ed Wood screenwriters Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, Ray Green, who made the documentary Vampira and Me, and the author of Mila's biography, Glamour Ghoul, her niece, Sandra Niemi. And there may be some other special guests. Following Ed Wood, there will be a showing of the one, the only, Plan 9 from Outer Space. That is all at the American Cinematheque Los Feliz 3. Tickets and information will be available at danagould.com/events or the American Cinematheque website. Prior to the film, at 3 p.m., there will be a short service at Mila's resting place at the world-famous Hollywood Forever Cemetery. It's the most fun you can have in a cemetery. That's December 11th, right here in beautiful Los Angeles, California. If you live in the San Francisco Bay Area, I will be performing at SF Sketchfest on January 27th, 28th, and 29th. Most specifically, I wanted to tell you about the 28th, where I will be the master of ceremonies for a roast of the one and only Mr. Bruce Campbell. The dais will feature Groovy Bruce himself, as well as Cassandra Peterson, better known to the world as Elvira, David Alan Grier, better known to the world as David Alan Grier, Kane Hodder, Peaches Christ, Ted Ramey, and Dana DiLorenzo. On January 29th, which is, I believe, the next day, there will be a tribute to the talented and charming friend of the podcast, Lorraine Newman. And following that, on the very same evening, a live read of I Married a Monster from Outer Space, featuring myself, Lorraine, Bobcat Goldthwait, Janet Varney, Baron Vaughn, and other stars of stage, screen, and song. Looking for holiday gifts? The Joyride album featuring myself and the aforementioned Bobcat Goldthwait is available on 800 Pound Gorilla, and the Blu-ray is available for purchase on Amazon. Lastly, thank Christ, if you like the show, please consider being a Dana Gould Hour Sky Cadet. Go to danagould.com and sign up for our Patreon. $5 a month, get you some extra audio content, some extra video content, and some random junk. We don't have graduated levels. $5 a month, and you get some stuff. A simple deal for complicated times. And now, it's on to our filthy business.
Podcast.
Dana Gould Hour. Never an hour.
Our guest today is someone who I have wanted to have on this show for many a year, but I was always too timid to ask. And then I learned that Colonel Jeff Fox, our producer, was a good friend of this person, had worked with him previously, and I immediately tugged on his coat. And as a result, we are sitting here now on Zoom. Alie Ward has won a daytime Emmy, which I don't think should be specified as a daytime Emmy. It's an Emmy. I have a dusk Emmy and a golden hour Emmy for Henry Ford's Innovation Nation with Mo Rocca. Is that how you pronounce that correctly?
Rocca.
Mo Rocca. Mo Rocca.
Yes.
Yeah, Mo Rocca. I know it's Mo Rocca. I always thought it was one word. But she's also she's consulting producer on some Netflix series. She's been on among Brainchild is one of the shows that she works on. Waffles and Mochi. Is that coming up?
It's on, yeah.
But the one that I really wanted to talk to her about is her podcast called Ologies, which is it's a science show, but it's funny and it's accessible.
Oh,
and
thanks for saying that.
And I have become aware specifically. I knew who Alie was, but I become aware of Ologies because of my daughter, who is a young scientist and is a big fan. So it's really a pleasure to have Alie Ward.
Thank you for having me. What an intro. I was just going to let you go as long as you wanted,
I'll
just
keep
to
going.
soak up some self-esteem for myself. You've raised an ologist. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Was she always into science and stuff?
Always.
Really?
It's so funny. Her she shared a bathroom with her next youngest sister, and they had I forget what they're called, his and her sinks, but it's hers and her sinks. They each have their own sink.
Jack and Jill, I think.
Jack and Jill, thank you, you're right. And on one of the mirrors, it was just Taylor Swift and all that. It was Taylor Swift and Harry Styles and all that stuff. And on Lou's mirror, it was dinosaurs and Teddy Roosevelt. I have this show on YouTube called Hanging with Dr. Z, which is a very accessible premise. It's what if Dr. Zayas from Planet of the Apes had a talk show in the 70s? And I have the full makeup, and she was looking at it finally, and she goes, "So that's the show? Just your sad, soulless eyes and that mask?"
Oh my God. I'm telling you, you're funny people raise funny people.
Yeah. But how did you get into, were you a science major? Like where did you go to school? How did you get into this particular line? And was this always your intended goal? Because you seem to be a performer to me.
It kind of always was my intended goal, but the thing that they don't teach you is like you're gonna fuck up a lot along the way and wind up in the wrong place, and then you gotta kind of correct a lot. And the thing I keep finding out about Ologies, interviewing all these different scientists, is that so many people started off in vet school and then they were like, I'm either not good at vet school, I don't want to do it, and now I'm a moose biologist living their best life in the tundra or whatever. So there's a lot of people who don't want to admit that they kind of started off one way. But do you remember the game Plinko on you remember how you on The Price is Right and it would go down and go ding 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 ding. I always feel like life is a little bit like kind of like Plinko. So I always loved science, and I was like a kind of a ham too, and I liked performing and putting on plays and stuff like that.
Yeah, you seem to be a performer first.
Like I love that very much, and it definitely keeps things interesting and fresh for me. And it's probably just like undiagnosed ADHD that I just don't want to have like one job for the rest of my life.
No, I feel this. I feel the same. I feel this. I feel the same way. And it's actually it works against you because people when you can walk and chew gum, people get confused.
They're like, which is it?
Yeah.
Do you like walking or chewing gum?
Yeah. Can I do both?
Like,
no.
I don't want to do just one.
Yeah.
But So I was like performing, but then I got a microscope when I was like 8 for Christmas, just like a $10 microscope. I think one of my parents, Santa needed some gifts, and they were like, try this one. And I loved it.
Really?
Loved it. I would look at so much weird shit under there. I would take a Q-tip along windowsills and be like, what's this look like? Like what, just gross stuff and fly parts. And I loved it. I was glued to it. Like now, like a kid with an iPad would be. I was like me and my microscope. So I loved it. And I ended up studying biology and AP biology and went into college as an environmental science major and biology major and organic chemistry and all that. But I was taking like studio art and film classes on the side and being like,
Yeah, those two tracks don't meet often.
No, not at all. The only place they meet is like David Attenborough. And if you're David Attenborough's producer or you're actually David Attenborough, like you're fucked, you know?
Right.
And so I decided to go into TV. I decided to go into film and TV. My major ended up being cinema and kind of like a minor in biology because I just didn't think that I could stay in a lab without losing my mind or something. And I didn't realize like how much field work and cool stuff there is. So I went the arts route, and then I was working in TV and I had parts on TV shows. Usually it would be like it was like late 90s, early aughts. So it'd be like a crime show where I would almost get killed or sexually assaulted or whatever. And then they'd figure out who did it by the end of the thing. And then I was a day player. And so I got mugged in real life, like in 2002. And I just didn't want to go audition for parts where I'd get like mauled and stuff.
Sure. That's understandable. Was that in LA or in San Francisco?
It was right in Hancock Park. Can you believe it?
Yeah. No, I've been mugged twice down here.
Yeah. You survived?
Yeah.
You didn't die either time?
No, but you got, I've had a gun in my face.
Did you still have to go out for NCIS parts?
No, I never did that. I was always a clown.
I swear they would see like a brunette girl that was like, she's not really hot enough to be like the hot girl, but like she'd be a good victim. So I kept going out for those.
Like hot girl, but with glasses. So
she's like, she's okay. She's telegenic enough to be the ugly friend. So I was always the less attractive brunette friend. But so I kind of plinkoed around, and then I did some journalism, did some broadcast journalism through my job at the LA Times, and then I went through this really bad depression in 2013. My dad just got diagnosed with cancer. Let's bring it down. And my boyfriend and I broke up. He was having a kind of a mental health crisis. Things were bad. And I went to the Natural History Museum in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And,
down by USC?
Yes. Yeah. Friend of a friend was like, you should volunteer here. And at the time I was working on a show, but I could spare a couple hours a week. So I went in and it changed my whole life.
Wow. What a great story.
I was like, it gave me some place else to be that wasn't work related. It was $0 an hour. I couldn't really get fired. And I would go in on Wednesday mornings and wear a vest and tell people about coyote ecology. And I'd talk to old Vietnam vets who were, retired, who were, volunteering. And then someone I knew in TV knew that I, was like, oh, I didn't realize that you like science. And I was like, duh. And then I ended up getting the job on CBS doing Innovation Nation through it. So it kind of really changed my trajectory.
Yeah, it really did. That's fantastic.
So I don't know if people are ever stuck or having a really hard time. I always try to ask people to, like, what would you volunteer doing? Would it be at like a dog shelter? Would it be tutoring kids in writing? Would it be something planting trees? Like if you're in a rut and you could spare a couple hours a week or a month to go volunteer, like it can really help get you out of your head and help you meet people, Yeah.
And so, and obviously having had my own, like anybody, your time where you're, in the haunted tree on Dagobah, it's just, you have to do stuff. You have to get out of your house. You have to get up out of bed, make your bed, get dressed, go out of the house, and things lead to things. And fake it till you make it. Just fake it. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of that. I've taken it to an obscene place where I'm always overly busy.
Overbooked?
It's always.
Really?
Yeah, for fear of a free moment when I'll just start screaming.
Do you have a hard time relaxing?
I've never relaxed, so I couldn't tell you.
So you wouldn't know. Why do you think that is? Is it, I imagine also, if you're a performer and you're going from job to job, are you are you just afraid of the ball dropping and then work completely dries up or activities dry up? Or is there ever that thing where you have to keep moving?
Yeah, I feel like that all the time. I mean, I perform now really for fun. I make my living as a writer. And so there's always something to do. I'm always working on something. And I like, even when I'm watching a movie on the couch, I always have a notepad with me I always feel like I have to be kind of also working at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, I like it. I do the same reason you do. I like it.
For some people, one person's like routine and comfort is another's like terrifying stagnation, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah. And I like the times, like you're working on a show. So even though it's not the same thing every day, you know that you're going to get up and you have to be someplace and you're going to film something. And I like to be tethered down by something like that and to have a check.
yeah.
But I can't just, and I know people that like comedian friends of mine, they're like, I just binged Andor. I thought it was great. I'm like, how do you have the time? But
Yes.
I'm trying to finish The Odd Couple. I haven't gotten up to Andor yet.
I'm the worst at that. I feel like I remember I had this kind of pivot in my life where I moved out. I was living with a boyfriend. We broke up and I moved out, got my own studio apartment for the first time. I was in my 20s and didn't have a TV. And I was like, I'll get a TV once I finish this deadline I'm on. And then by the time I was finished with that, I had a new one.
Right.
I was like, I'll get a TV after I finish this thing, after I finish this art show I'm working on. And it was 7 years later, I got a TV. And I was like, I missed this whole epic of like television. Like,
Did you really miss it?
I don't know. It's all bingeable now. But yeah, I do always feel like even if I'm watching a documentary, I'm soaking up stuff that I'll need to use later. I'm gathering, I'm hunting and gathering information.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's the thing I always say is things lead to things. So just do things and things will happen. And I'm sure I've gotten a job. People get jobs from tweets and things like that,
Yes.
If Twitter is still going by the time this
I know.
drops.
Did you get any text last night saying Twitter's on fire?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I got some text last night.
I'm not a huge, I was really big on it, but what my take, if you're not being politically, if it's not about politics, it doesn't get any traction. It's really just a place to argue politics, which bores me.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do
at least
feel
in the Twitter that I'm in. I know there are different Twitters. There's film Twitter and Black Twitter and
Science Twitter's got
Science
one.
Twitter, yeah. Disco revisionism Twitter.
It is weird though how much you can work all the time if you want to. I'm really learning a lot about that, learning about myself, when to put the brakes on. And I discovered this thing recently that I found so helpful. And a lot of people do it, but I had never kind of tried it before, but it's like just sleeping and it's really nice. It's like,
yes.
I haven't committed to doing 8 hours a night my entire life.
Me neither. I'm 6.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And the last maybe 3 weeks, I've just been fuck it. I'm going to bed at 8. I'm going to bed at 9.
Wow.
And I gotta say, I understand the hype. I do wake up in a better mood. And I always think...
true. But I don't think I could physically do those hours.
It's not easy. But it's nice once you do it. But I'm just learning. I had a phase in my life where I drank a lot of yerba mate and didn't sleep a lot. I was so wired. Have you ever had yerba mate?
No, but I have had chronic insomnia.
What happens when you have insomnia?
I ended up at Cedars because I went once in 1994. I don't remember sleeping for this period of time, but the doctor says there's no way I didn't sleep. So I probably slept and have no memory of it because I was so psychotic. 11 days.
Oh, you die. You die.
You don't, but it's awful. And
What'd they do to you at Cedars?
You go there because you have nowhere else to go. And obviously they think you're on drugs. And so they ask you what drugs you took and you say you haven't taken any drugs. And they go, and then they take a blood and urine sample to find out what drugs you took. And then they see that you have no drugs in your system. And then they all come back and they go, okay, wait a minute. How long have you been awake?
Did they call every intern to come and look at you? Did they poke you?
That I don't remember. They did call the staff psychiatrist, who is still my psychiatrist.
Really?
Yes.
For this long?
Mm-hmm.
What a relationship. Is that one of the longest relationships?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd have to say, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And his work has got to be good if you stuck with him and haven't said
well, he's put me on, what is weird about those things is like, you think that, well, my brain doesn't work anymore. This is how I die. Mm-hmm. And then they go, no, you have panic disorder and you're having hypersomnia. You're having, you're hypervigilant because of it. And they just tell you what it is. It's this, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. Mm-hmm. And take this and take this. And then I had to do some work. I had to the thing that triggered the anxiety it was just family crap that I had to confront and do. You have to have uncomfortable conversations with people. But no, that was the beginning of and I'll shut up about myself after I say this. That was I was 30, and I know people that I meet people that knew me before I was 30, and I just go, "Hey, I'm really sorry."
Do they say, Dana, you've changed so much? And I'm so proud of you.
You're a lot calmer now. You're a lot calmer. I was like a hummingbird on a Coke binge.
Did you ever get diagnosed with ADHD?
No.
Did they ever put you on Adderall?
No, but I'm sure I haven't.
Yeah.
I'm sure I mean, yeah.
I can relate. I just did this episode on ADHD. I didn't just do it. I did it in February, but I get letters about it every day. With this guy named Russell Barkley, Dr. Russell Barkley, who's one of the top experts in ADHD. And yeah, we talked a lot about how diagnosis has changed so much.
Right.
A lot of, they didn't really recognize it in people or women for a long time. But yeah, it presents differently. But this restlessness, this interesting, there's a lot that you think, what the fuck is wrong with me? And then you learn about it. You go, oh, never mind. I'm okay. But,
yeah. I mean, it's and one of my children was diagnosed with ADHD, and I was immediately like, honey, does every kid have to take Adderall? But I'm going to tell you, day and night, her grades went because she was way too smart to not be showing it academically, and it was just helping her focus on studying. I mean, it was day and night.
I'm sure she's so thankful for that. Same with my husband. My husband was diagnosed at 32. Yeah. He was the one I broke up with when I was so sad, who's having a mental health crisis, by the way. The good news about that whole thing
of this. Get back together.
Yeah. This that horrible period of depression is my dad lived another 9 years.
Mm-hmm. Did he go into remission completely or just dealt with it?
Yeah, he had multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer that you just have to take kind of daily chemo to be on. So he was on chemo for 9.5 years, but his prognosis was only 2 years.
Yeah.
At that, and his brother had just died from the same rare cancer. So, and he had said to my mom that when he was diagnosed, he just wished he had another 10 years, and he lived 9.5. So we feel very lucky about that.
Yeah.
At the time, obviously, I didn't know that, and my husband Jarrett hadn't been diagnosed with ADHD yet, and so there were a lot of things that and I've since learned a bit about my brain and how it works. But yeah, so I think the reason I do Ologies is just so that I can scam free therapy off of scientists who know better. It's I can't tell you
Well, yeah. What was the? Is your husband in the sciences at all, or is he in show business at all, or just a civilian?
He just built a karate dummy in the backyard. He's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, who's also an actor who does comedy acting and stuff. But he's hilarious. He's a Tasmanian devil. He took a stunt driving class just for the fun of it. So he funny. Channels all of that into just
So he is. See, that's the thing with Cobra Kai is people who watch Cobra Kai assume that if you live in the San Fernando Valley that you're automatically part of a dojo. Yes. Actually, no, there are people in the valley that aren't in dojos. It's hard to believe. But
a few of them.
Your husband is actually not one of those people. He is in a dojo.
He actually is in a dojo.
Yeah.
over the pandemic, he couldn't do it. He was going crazy. It was like having an Australian Shepherd or like a Malamute in like a studio apartment. He just needed to go out and be like, and he couldn't do it because of COVID. And so then, everyone got vaccinated. He got back into it and immediately like tore his knee and had to sit it out for like another 6 months. So he's like, but hence, so we have like a karate dummy in the backyard. But
that's understandable.
And boxing gloves everywhere. But
in case you're attacked by karate dummies,
you never know. Sometimes the goblins, they get it. You never know. In 2022, anything can happen. But I always loved, but getting back to it, I always loved science. And for all of these episodes, like I interviewed a somnologist who's a sleep expert. And
oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. And I just interviewed, it hasn't gone up yet. I just interviewed a dream expert. So but the somnologist, we talk about how long you can live without sleeping. And I'm going to tell you.
Wait a minute. Is that up?
Yes, it's up. And I think I did an encore of it a couple months ago. I'll send you the link. It's Somnology.
I'm looking. I'm on this. I'm on the site.
We've done 250 episodes.
I know.
It's crazy. I don't even know how we pulled it off.
I will find it.
Find it.
I wanted to talk to you about Gorillology, which I don't know if you made that one up. But the science of sleep is truly fascinating.
Yeah.
And what happens with your brain and just the warehouse.
You would love that one. Can I tell you the best insomnia hack I've ever heard?
Yeah. What was your longest insomnia jag?
I've stayed up. I've pulled all-nighters like 2 days, but those were deadline induced.
Right. So it wasn't involuntary.
Wasn't involuntary. Yeah. And I'm a little bit the opposite where I can fall asleep pretty much anywhere. But a lot of times I'll have caffeine or I'll have to fall asleep at like 6 p.m. my time for a shoot that's really early. So, but I shared this because it's my mom's hack and I shared it on the Somnology episode and I still get messages and emails about it. We call it the Fancy Nancy because her name is Nancy and she's fancy. And this is what she does. She picks a category of something like movies or places or fruits or desserts or something like bands. And she starts with something that starts with A, apple. And she goes banana, goes cherry. And she does that like, I think maybe I've only gotten to like R and I'm out.
Oh, good, but good.
I asked this dream researcher why that works, and he told me about the default network, which is a poorly named area of your brain that your imagination is stored in. Not stored in, but that's kind of the locus of imagination. Center, And when you're in taskmaster mode, when you're thinking about your real life, you're not really able to shut that down and let your imagination go. So anyway, it stops you from thinking about real problems and gives you kind of like a fake problem to like imagine things. And then also it's like a lot of visual imagery that just kind of slips you off. So give it a try. If anyone out there has sleep problems, I don't know if it can't fix 11 days of insomnia. That you just need like a horse tranquilizer.
Dr. Klonopin.
Yes, you do need Dr. Klonopin, but it's a good hack.
Yeah, no, that's a great. Yeah, I've heard similar ones. Usually if I read, I will.
You'll doze.
Yeah.
Do you have to pick boring books?
No, just like, again, because, so much. I feel like I'm talking about myself way too much.
This is what happens when you interview someone who interviews people. I'm the worst at this. Dana, I would go on dates. With people and literally at the end, they'd be like, wait, I don't know anything about you. And I'd be like, I'm so sorry.
I know.
I get things out of people that I don't even mean to get. I went on a first date. With a guy and he told me how many tens of thousands of dollars of debt he was in and like some stuff with his mom that was a little too personal. Like, I don't know how I do it.
My wife told me.
So I asked too many questions.
My wife told me that and I didn't really recall this, but apparently on our first date, I talked all about my divorce, which I don't recommend.
Oh no. But look, it worked out.
Did.
You found a high threshold. You found she's a good listener.
Yeah.
That's good.
But I forget what the question was.
Dr. Klonopin.
Dr. Klonopin. No,
some
it's
sleep
gone
hacks.
wrong. Oh yeah, no. If I read, I will start to drift. I will start to drift off. It doesn't have to be a boring book. I will just start to go away. But my whole life is geared towards working myself to exhaustion, so I will sleep.
Yeah.
Because when you don't sleep, to me, you're not alive. It's like, I feel like a ghost when I don't sleep. Because to me, it's like everyone I'm around is in Wednesday. But to me, I'm still in Tuesday because I haven't ended that chapter. And I feel like I'm not present in the same world that everybody else is.
Oh, that's such a good way of putting it.
Yeah,
yes, that's such a good way of putting it.
And I hate it.
Yes. You know what's right underneath the ghostiness too for me is this little roiling resentment that I'm like, everybody else gets to be a person. Everyone else gets to be on Wednesday. I gotta be a Tuesday.
Yeah. Raging resentment.
Yes.
I'll tell you another weird one that's it's unrelated but related. We always go on vacation to this one hotel in Hawaii with the babies. Mm-hmm. I go to Hawaii, I'm working and I'm staying at the hotel next door. During the day, I walk over to the other hotel. Mm-hmm. And I had to leave because I felt like a ghost. Because it's like, this is the little kiddie pool where I raised my children. Mm-hmm. But I'm alone. They're not with me. There's no one here. It was like the same hotel where I had my first honeymoon. I was just like, I can't be here. I can't be here.
Mm-hmm.
I had to get out of here.
Too many memes.
Yeah, too many memes. It was like going to your old high school. Like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah. And, it's interesting, though, because it's like, there is that feeling where you have to, some of us have this feeling where I got to keep going. I got to work. Can't drop the ball.
Right. Right.
And because of that, we don't allow ourselves the things that other people allow themselves. And those people aren't taking them away from us, but it is really hard to give yourself the things that you feel like other people get. And there's also this hubris in it where you're like, do I really need to sleep though? Maybe other people need to sleep, but I can get away with not.
The brutal,
That's what I do.
and this is somnology for people who are listening to this that want to get into ology, which it's so good. Somnology, and the dream one is coming. It's not up yet.
There's a chronobiology one too, which is about circadian rhythms, which is great for this time of year.
Right. What is the dream one called?
It'll be called Oneurology.
Oneurology?
O-N-E, like one urology. And that's going to be about dreaming. And I just recorded that. It should be
then there's Onenology, which is every comedian on the road.
Yeah. No, that one will be up in January. I lied.
Onenology.
But
Great. I really want to my
that one's good stuff.
Yeah, my wife is very much into. In fact, for a long time, the only time my wife and I would fight was when I did something to her in a dream. Like we were in a Ferris wheel last night, and then you flew away on a giant woodchuck and left me alone with my high school woodshop teacher. Like, I didn't really do that.
Oh my God. Have you ever done giant doses of mushrooms? Have you ever decided to do that?
Never done anything.
Really? Other than maybe Klonopin when necessary.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I was drunk once in 1978. I thought,
good for you.
I'm good for this.
Good.
And I went through, I was a stand-up comedian in the 80s. I have seen more cocaine done than the Eagles roadie, but I've never enjoyed it.
I was never offered cocaine, and I used to be a music journalist, and I was so offended because I was like, one's ever, I've seen one person do cocaine, and it was a UCB party by themselves off a key. No one ever offered it to me. So I was like, who's getting offered this? But I did do through my psychiatrist's suggestion, I have never talked about this publicly. But in August, my dad died in July, and in August, through the advice of my psychiatrist.
Yeah, no, I've heard of it. Is it MDMA or no? I've heard a lot
mushrooms.
I've heard a lot of people that go on guided
like psilocybin
experiences. Yeah. So tell me about that.
I was terrified as someone who is. Me too. Oh God.
Because I'm going to make an assumption about you.
Okay.
You like to be in control.
I like to not in control, perhaps.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. Am I going to have to wear a diaper for this? Like, am I going to say something weird? Am I going to jump out of a window on LSD? Like the Dare videos that they used to show us.
Sure.
But I was really scared. I did a bunch of research, and again, through my psychiatrist, and I was so nervous. And really, it was about 6 hours of my life that was one of the most like magical and helpful days of my life. Like there was you go into like a dream state. You've got, for me, I followed like the Imperial College of London protocol and the Yale psychiatry protocol. Eye mask, headphones with a very particular soundtrack that kind of guides you along. And it was like being in a dream where you could interact and like pull apart so many of your anxieties and things that you were afraid of. And it was so weird. Everything was very like rainbowy and magical. And, you know, again, you don't see anything, you have an eye mask on. But yeah, I talked to my dead grandma, who was a real bitch. She was like, so sorry, I just wanted to be an artist, didn't want to have all those kids. And I was like, thanks for letting me know. You know, just like weird, like people coming in and out where even if it's all in your mind, having discussions with things that have kind of plagued you in the background.
Are you aware at the time that you're tripping?
Very much so. You're
Okay.
like, it feels like if you, you know, when you are.
See, that would be my concern is like, I'm not in my right mind, and I'm powerless to change the channel back to my right mind. And now I am trapped in a world that I know is not the real one, and I'm going to go insane. And I'll never get out of, it's why, and then I'll, again, shut up about myself.
No.
It's why I don't like elevators.
Really?
Because if that thing gets stuck, I am powerless to get out. I am relying on someone else to come and save me, and they're never going to come. And that's where I die. And 20 years later, they find a skeleton in the elevator, and it's me.
And that happens so much. There's so many elevators with skeletons in them. I mean, I feel like I hear about them on the news every day.
It's true. Skelevators, they're called.
Skelevators. Do you know that that's why they invented elevator music, is because they used to have people that were elevator operators and then they went to automated, and people were so freaked out about not having a person in control that they had to pipe in music to try to calm them down. Yeah. And I feel like we're going to be that way about
if it had a doorknob. If it had a doorknob, I would be fine.
I know. Instead, all you have is gravity and trust.
I'm not afraid of it falling. I'm not afraid of it. I'm afraid of it stuck and just can't open the door. No one is aware of it, and that's it. You're in a box. You're done. You're in a sarcophagus, and that's how. And so to get back to what we're talking about, the reason, because Mrs. Gould is always like, you really need to take MDMA and go on a guided thing and go on a vision quest or whatever. Go to everything. All roads go to Burning Man, and I'm like,
which I've never been to.
Yeah, me neither. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that.
I know.
Because I don't want to not be in control of my thoughts.
For me, what was interesting about it, and again, a lot of anxiety for me, didn't know what was going to happen. I was afraid I was going to walk in there and it was going to be like the Willy Wonka tunnel of like horrors.
Yeah.
And I was going to get stuck there. And with the psychiatry behind it is like, if you see something that's a little scary, just know it can't hurt you. Approach it with curiosity and just say, why is this scary thing here? And then move on.
Is your therapist with you?
No, my therapist wasn't. He gave me a lot of resources. And then I had my husband in the room just for like the first 30, 40 minutes. And then I was babbling so much out loud. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm talking about you. Can you leave? And he's like, sure, absolutely. And I called him back when I had to go. I was like, can you guide me to the bathroom, but don't let me see my own face in the mirror because I don't want that to fuck me up. And he's like, sure. And then
okay, so you're a little aware of.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're not, it's not like you are in a coma that you hop out of. It's like you're in kind of a dream state. And
do you know how long it's going to be?
Yeah, it's like 15, 20 minutes before you start to feel it, about 3 hours at the peak of it. And then you come down and it's about 5-6 hours total. And so by 5 or 6 hours from when you took it, you're like, maybe you feel like if you just had like a cocktail or something, like not even that, like you just feel a little bit like,
so you do know that, okay, there's eventually an exit.
Yeah. But there was so many things that I felt like I was able to finally internalize, like about not being so hard on myself, about, again, like I'm it's let me be like, okay, I deserve to sleep just like everybody else. Like I'm not proving anything. I deserve to go to sleep. And it was weird because in it, I felt more myself than I felt like on the outside. You know what I mean? Like I felt like in there, wherever that was, I was like, I felt more elementally myself like I was as a kid, you know, running around curious, less self-conscious, policing myself less work driven, and more just like, okay, this is who I really am. And a lot of my traits that are anxiety related and overworking and self-conscious, a lot of those are protective shells that I put on just to cope with the world. And so it was kind of the opposite, where I felt like, in a way, personality-wise, that felt more real me than the things that I use, the armor that I use on the outside. So it's let me kind of strip away some of the armor in the real world. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do.
Weirdly. But I was definitely very afraid to do it at first. And I wouldn't have done it if my psychiatrist hadn't been like, well, you know, you might want to give this a try. We've tried to come at your anxiety from different things, and let's give this a try. Do
you take anything else? Are you on meds?
I am on meds. I'm on an SNRI, which helps with attention stuff, and also I have the worst hormones in the world, and so it helps. Yay! What's that?
Oh, that's a Zoloft. Hey! Every day I take the Zoloft the size of a do you know what a hod brick is?
No, but it's large.
It's like half a loaf of bread. And I just keep it in the car, and at red lights and stop signs, I just lick it like a deer at a salt lick.
Just and constantly chipping away. That is the hardest thing about, for me, doing that psilocybin therapy, was you have to be off of a serotonin reuptake for a couple weeks ahead of time. And that was not fun coming off and on it. Right. You know, no. That wasn't great.
Yeah, coming off Klonopin, I don't recommend it.
Oh, not a good thing.
Zoloft is okay, but coming off Klonopin is you have to be monitored.
Oh, I'm
that's
sure.
Brutally addictive.
I'm sure.
But that's decades. That's decades old.
Yeah.
The best thing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say there's an episode I've been wanting to do for years about psychopharmacology, obviously. Yeah. And there's a really, really great researcher who does a lot of work with like psilocybin and MDMA, and who's at UCLA, Dr. Grobe, that I'd love to go see. But yeah, like just in general, a psychopharmacology episode just about all of the different antidepressants and things that we're on.
And here's my question.
Mm-hmm. Bring it on.
Is there evil? Like was Hitler? Yeah, was Hitler evil or just very sick?
I've wondered that myself.
Manson wore the dickens out of buckskin. I always give him that.
He really did.
And at 5'4", he packed a lot in.
He had the swagger necessary to start a cult.
Yeah, he did. Same size as Rod Serling, 5'4".
Really?
The good and the bad of the 5'4" dictate. But I do. It's just like, did Hitler just need lithium, or is he evil? Like, is clinical narcissism something that can be medicated, or is it just like, nope, that's just a part of this animal that happens?
I mean, I think definitely like sociopathy and these things are, I think evil and illness overlap very much in a Venn diagram, but yeah. It's, and it's funny because in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of upheaval in general in the United States without naming any names. And
I've not noticed, but go ahead.
It's almost uncouth to speculate on what might be the driving pathology behind certain choices made to gain power.
And it's a combination of a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And this is what happens 20 years after you gut the education system. And and also, but what I didn't realize, and it's underreported, was that a lot of people on January 6th specifically were really fucked up on very high grade, whatever the marijuana is now. It's much more potent than it used to be. And
really?
You have a lot of people that are just really fucked up.
Oh my God. Well, this definitely does need an episode for sure.
Yeah.
I should do an episode on this. But yeah, I don't know.
And I would combine it with gorillology. Are there evil gorillas or just sick gorillas?
You got to figure there must be evil gorillas. And I don't know if all the gorillas just gang up and kill the bad gorilla. I don't know what happened.
Tom, that was one of the things I wanted to ask you was.
About gorillas.
Well, did Coco really sign?
Good question.
Because that's a debate.
Yes. The fact that I can't remember right now is terrifying. But I think the verdict was that you can teach a lot of animals to do things for rewards.
Right.
And I honestly don't remember. And now I have to look up the transcript. But
I think a lot of it was, from what I understand, was people it's sort of like how like a psychic will go like you had a problem with water. Like, oh yeah, I did. Yeah.
How'd you know? Because
everyone has. And that they were like, she would sign something and they would be like, oh, she must mean this, or she,
right.
She said leaf blower because she wants an apple, and apples are on trees and trees have leaves. That must be what this is.
But my favorite Coco story is when she was angry about something, ripped a sink out of the wall, and they asked her who did it, and she said the kitten did it. She's like, the cat. It wasn't me. So I feel, but there was a lot of controversy about Coco and about her handler and about how much of it was fabricated. But it's a good question, and I feel like I need to go back to it. And the fact that I've done so many episodes that sometimes I completely forget the facts of them is terrifying.
How many? Do you do one a week
one a week for 5 years? And they're 90-minute, like researched, edited episodes.
So, is that your full-time? Is that your full-time job or one of your full-time jobs?
It's pretty much my full-time job. Yeah. And then I work on, CBS and other stuff. But but Ologies takes up the most of my time. But it's the most rewarding.
But last quick questions for my own personal edification.
Yes.
What was the origin of vampirology? Because it seemed like you did stray out of science for that.
I swear that is a real ology. Here's my rule. All right, Dana, here's the deal. If I can find the word in the literature, I will use it. And sometimes the literature is someone's Pinterest board called that ology, and that's fine. But you'd be surprised how many of the ologies that I actually talk about were like noted one time in the literature in the 1800s. But yeah, so vampirology, this guy is a vampire historian. Mm-hmm. That's what he does. He teaches courses on it. In Indiana.
But
what a treasure.
Does he teach vampirology in fiction, or does he study like Count Bathory and then Vlad Tepes and like what is it?
Dude, all of it. His syllabus is 64 pages long. Okay. He has every single work of fiction in vampires chronicled. But that episode, it's a two-parter, and we talk a lot about the folklore of vampires and where it came from. Sure. And it came because there wasn't WebMD back then. So if you had cancer or if you had anemia or something was wrong with you, they're like, clearly someone who recently died is back from the dead and is sucking dry.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. It makes sense. Mm-hmm. And it lends itself to so many projections of human behavior. Like you can write
100%.
Your book can be about anything. It's like, it can be about the plague, sexuality, gender roles. You can use vampirology as it's an all-use metaphor.
Yes, especially for just shitty people. But then it's interesting because what he says, this is Dr. Jeff Holden in University of Indiana, Bloomington, but he says like every era creates a vampire it needs, whether it's like a hot vampire, like a remorseful one, or one that's cast aside. And so it's really interesting to see how our vampires have changed too. And also the very first vampire like book novel was written because there was a volcano in I want to say 1816. Was that right? Can't remember. Anyway,
was this Varney the Vampire? Is that the first one?
This was the vampire written about Lord Byron. Someone was trapped in a house with Lord Byron for real in the summer where there was no sun because there was a volcano, and they were pissed because he was like kind of sexy and got all the ladies, and they wrote kind of a scathing subtweety kind of novel about some shitty vampire, and then everyone thought Lord Byron wrote it, and he was like, no, that's garbage. I didn't write it. It's just about me. Anyway, so it's interesting to see.
That's funny.
The way that we change and what we need in fiction and stuff. But so if I can find an ology,
right,
I'll do an episode on it. There's an ology for lighthouses. There's an ology for all kinds of weird shit. So if I can find them.
Do you have like a couple of, do you have favorite, if you want to point somebody to an episode, if they're starting out, like check that one out. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Chiropterology is a study of bats. And there is a man with a push broom mustache in Austin. His name is Dr. Merlin Tuttle. He is one of the world experts in bats. What a man. I did a two-parter.
What a name.
Oh, what a name. I love him so much. And he's 80. I love him. We sat down and talked for 3 hours. I made a two-parter. And it's everything from like, he has these stories like Indiana Jones stories where he's been trapped in caves and like he's been cornered by bootleggers and to all these, all these myths about bats. There's also one about crow funerals with Dr. Kaylee Swift about how crows have funerals and what they do.
Crows and elephants.
Oh, it's nuts. It's so great. So there's a ton of them. I just put up one about bryology, which is Dr. Robin Wall-Kimmerer about moss, and she just speaks so calmly about looking at moss through magnifying glasses and about indigenous ecology. So yeah, those are some faves.
Wow,
definitely.
That's great. And I'm gonna go right to the somnology. Is that
Get it? It will teach you a lot. And the biggest thing is you deserve to rest. You deserve sleep. Your brain deserves it. Just remember that. We also have, there's a molecular neurobiology too, a little bit about serotonin and dopamine. The ADHD ones are bangers, the most popular by far. And then I did one on pain too called Dolorology about how much pain is psychological as well as psychosocial. And that's really interesting about like chronic pain and stuff. So there's a lot of, and then of course there's ones about like frogs and toads and bats. And
I always find it weird that there's people that have to live with chronic pain. Mm-hmm. And then there are people who pay people to hurt them.
I know. We do have a sexology episode, so that fits right up in there.
It's sort of a takeoff on the George Carlin point about like only in this country can you have somebody digging through the dumpster for a peach pit and a half mile away somebody eats a perfectly good meal and then pukes it up intentionally. It's sort of the same thing. It's like,
it hurts to think about.
In
a good way, I guess, I suppose.
Last question, do you find, there's that great quote by Isaac Asimov that you'll probably know better than I was, that there's a long tradition in America that is a hostility towards knowledge. And there's an arrogance that people believe in. The key of the quote is, and I'm obviously not even trying to do the quote word for word, but the bottom line is people think that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge because I believe it. Do you find that there is a greater hostility towards science now than before, or do we just know more about everything faster because of technology?
That's an excellent question. It's definitely one for the ages. I feel like in the 70s, 80s, into the 90s, there was definitely like a movement of like anti-intellectualism. And I think that was mistaken for like a leveling of a playing field because everything had been so elitist in terms of like, only men were allowed to go to Ivy League schools. They did not allow people of color into places. And so there was this leveling off where your intellectualism doesn't matter. And it's funny because I just saw a clip the other day from Friends where Rachel is just rolling her eyes and falling asleep because Ross mentions he's a paleontologist. And it was like the big gag was like, oh, can you believe how boring this guy is? And that wasn't that long ago, but I feel like...
Right. No, it wasn't.
Yeah. I feel like there definitely is a don't tell me how to live my life kind of a overarching feeling. And unfortunately, if you're like a medical doctor or you have knowledge, people might not want to hear it because that is a loss of control. Because the more we know we shouldn't do. And the more we know we shouldn't do, the less freedom of choice we think we have. And so I think that it's, and I think we see that with masks and vaccines and, people say that sitting is the new smoking. Some people don't want to hear about how bad smoking is for them. They just want to smoke. And
yeah.
And so it's like best intentions. But also I think that people are afraid of change. And so changing habits is really difficult and changing themselves for the better is difficult because what if you try and you fail? So that's how I think about it.
Yeah. And if you define yourself there are comedians that I know that their whole persona is that they're a rebel. And because they're a rebel, they smoke. And if they don't smoke, then they're not a rebel and they're not who they think they are. And that's an existential death and they can't even tolerate the concept.
Yes. Yeah. I think it threatens the shells of who we think we are. And so
that's really well put. It just threatens who you think you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, the fact that there's such an absolute political divide on things like vaccines and masks. My mom watches Fox News. Shockingly, we don't get along about that. I love my mom, but she's a victim of the Rush Limbaugh 80s. And hearing
that stole a generation of parents.
It really did. And the whole thing is anxiety sells. If it bleeds, it leads. And I worked at a newspaper. I worked at journalism.
Fear is a motivator. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the more scared we can get people, the more we can keep their attention. So I think, but I think that there's beauty in knowledge, and what we have to understand is the reason why we acquire knowledge is because of curiosity, and curiosity is like so elemental to who we are as humans, and it's a part of our imagination. It's a part of getting to know each other and the world around us better. So if you can look at knowledge as a product of curiosity and celebrate curiosity and the passion that it takes to get the information, then you kind of shift your perspective on it,
Wow, that's well put.
But,
and all of these can be explored greater in your podcast, Ologies, and you can also be seen on Henry Ford's Innovation Nation with Mo Rocca on the CBS television network.
True story.
The Tiffany Network. Alie Ward, thank you so very much for coming up. Where can people, if just hearing this, do they just follow you? Are you Alie Ward on all platforms?
I'm Alie Ward on everything. Although I just started
ALIEWARD.
Yep, and then I just started doing TikTok. Wish me the best of luck. It's
you're not alone.
I know, Alie_Ologies, and I'm like challenging myself to put something up this week. My last video was like a year ago.
Oh, I know, it's hard, but
I got to learn how the buttons work.
I know.
So I'm going to try and do something.
I hired a person.
You did?
I did.
Has it been helpful?
Beyond description.
So I'm going to ask you for their email after that.
I will.
I'll talk to you soon, I hope.
Yes, absolutely. To be continued.
They're true tales from Weirdsville. Tales from Weirdsville. And they're true.
Can your heart stand the shocking facts?
In the 1960s and 1970s, few comic actors were as revered as British comedian Peter Sellers. From his astounding turns in Stanley Kubrick's Lolita and Dr. Strangelove, where he played three major roles, to Blake Edwards' Pink Panther series, Peter Sellers was in a class of his own. He got a start on British variety stages in the 1940s and 1950s, and then later on radio. In 1948, Sellers was starring in a BBC radio comedy series called Third Division, alongside two other comic actors, Harry Seacombe and Michael Bentine. As the legend has it, one night Sellers and Bentine went to support Seacombe at a show at the Hackney Empire Theatre. The show also featured an Irish comedian named Spike Milligan. The four men then repaired to Grafton's Public House for an after-show pint, and a camaraderie developed. From these humble beginnings, The Goon Show was formed, which ran for 10 seasons on BBC Radio, making stars of its cast and influencing a generation of British comedians and musicians. Both the Pythons and the Beatles were hugely influenced by the Goons. In fact, one of the main reasons the Beatles trusted their producer George Martin was because previously he had worked with the Goons. As Sellers' star climbed, he began appearing in movies. Small parts in comedies like The Lady Killers with Alec Guinness, eventually moving up to co-starring roles in films like I'm All Right, Jack with Terry Thomas. But then in 1962, Stanley Kubrick asked Sellers to play Claire Quilty in his screen adaptation of Vladimir Nabokov's novel Lolita. Now, the idea of putting Nabokov's book on screen was so preposterous at the time that the tagline on the poster was, "How do they ever make a movie of Lolita?" The following year, Blake Edwards offered Sellers the role of Inspector Clouseau in the first The Pink Panther, and from there was no looking back. At this point, we must pause and draw our attention to 15th century British mathematician Sir Isaac Newton. It is Newton's third law of motion that teaches us that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. This applies to all forces in nature, and Peter Sellers was nothing if not a force of nature. Unfortunately for Sellers, and worse for those close to him, the same brain that made all the good stuff made all the bad stuff too. For all of the genius work that Sellers created, Stanley Kubrick claimed that when unleashed, Sellers could achieve a state of comic ecstasy. But he was also plagued by equally potent dark forces: depression, paranoia, superstition, and addiction. People close to Sellers describe him, when trying to be charitable, as an empty vessel. He was who he was playing. And when he wasn't playing anybody, there really wasn't anybody there. Sellers' mother visited him on the set of Dr. Strangelove on a day when Peter was playing American President Merkin Muffley. After lunch, Kubrick approached Mrs. Sellers and asked if she enjoyed having lunch with her son, to which she replied, "How would I know? I just had lunch with the President of the United States." In an article for The Record entitled "Pursuing Peter Sellers, Comic and Madman" by a guy named Lawrence Shollet, Sellers' friend Roger Lewis is quoted as saying, "He'd play a role of an Indian doctor, and for the next 6 months, he'd be an Indian doctor in real life." To paraphrase one of my old therapist's favorite expressions, there seemed to be no adult on board. Peter's son Michael wrote a memoir about his father entitled P.S. I Love You, in which he recalls when, in 1960, Sellers starred alongside Sophia Loren in the film The Heiress. He promptly fell in love with Loren, told his wife, and then went upstairs to wake up his young son and ask, "Should I divorce your mommy?" Yikes. Well, the Sellers did divorce, although Sophia Loren and Peter never married. Those close to them say that they were only and ever friends. Sellers did marry Swedish actress Britt Ekland, but the ensuing years were marred by Sellers' increasingly erratic behavior. According to Ed Sykov's book, Mr. Strangelove, a biography of Peter Sellers, one night, Sellers inhaled a bunch of amyl nitrate, or poppers, as they were called at the time. They were used as a sexual stimulant, and apparently Peter Sellers was in search of, quote, the ultimate orgasm. What he got instead was a series of 8 heart attacks over 3 hours. Sellers recovered, and the couple went on to make a film together entitled After the Fox, which was apparently also shot after the Fox, because, all right. But Sellers didn't like the director of After the Fox and tried to get him fired halfway through the production, alienating the crew. On Casino Royale, the 1967 version, Sellers didn't get along with his co-star Orson Welles and refused to be on set or in the same shot with him. This was tricky, as the two men's scenes were across from each other at a card table. On the film The Bobo, Sellers informed the director that he was leaving the set and would not return until he had fired his co-star. Unfortunately, his co-star was his own wife, Britt Ekland. And that was a wrap on marriage number 2. According to Ed Sykov's book, again, Spike Milligan, Sellers' old goon show pal, and one of his best friends, sent Britt Ekland a congratulatory telegram when the divorce was finalized. In 1970, Sellers married Miranda Quarry, a model 22 years his junior. This was all a part of Operation What Could Go Wrong. The marriage was, believe it or not, less than a rip-roaring success. Unhappy in the relationship, Sellers' work suffered. In May of 1973, he went to see Liza Minnelli perform and walked away enthralled. Who wouldn't? The two were engaged 3 days later. She was in a relationship at the time, and Sellers was still married. But what the heck? That all went down in 1973. In that year, Peter Medak found himself a hot young director in Britain. He was an émigré from Hungary and had made a successful film of the play A Day in the Death of Joe Egg, and had followed that up with a film called The Ruling Class, which earned its star Peter O'Toole an Oscar nomination. Hot off these successes, United Artists summoned Medak to Hollywood to discuss directing one of their hotter properties. It was based on a novel by a guy named Brian Garfield, and it told the story of a mild-mannered 60-year-old accountant whose family was destroyed by violence. When the police fail to find the perpetrators, he becomes a vigilante and takes the law into his own hands. Medak wanted Henry Fonda to star in it, as he felt that audience would believe him as a mild-mannered accountant, and would therefore follow him on his road to hell, as it were. United Artists balked at that idea, and, unable to agree on a star, parted ways with the director. Michael Winner was then brought on board to direct. Winner and UA both agreed that Charles Bronson, nobody's idea of a mild-mannered accountant, was perfect to star in the film, which was, of course, titled Death Wish. So Peter Medak went back to London and literally bumped into Peter Sellers. Sellers pitched Medak on a movie that he wanted to make. It was about pirates. Now, according to an article in Cinema Retro magazine, Medak had an infant son at the time and said, quote, "I'd walked out of one movie 3 days before. I had to do something else." Sellers' script was entitled Ghost in the Noonday Sun, and it needed some work. Medak had one man in mind, Sellers' pal, Spike Milligan. The script was repaired to everyone's satisfaction, and the crew embarked for Cyprus. And then, before a frame of film was shot, things on Ghost in the Noonday Sun began to go awry. Unbeknownst to Medak, the day before leaving for the set, Sellers' relationship with Liza Minnelli fell apart. Hard to believe. But it put the star in a depressed and foul mood. Beknownst to Medak, because it happened right in front of him, the other star of the film, a pirate ship, which had been meticulously built over the hull of an old African boat, arrived into port under the hand of a very drunk captain, who immediately cracked the hull against some rocks, causing the ship to list in the harbor. They hadn't started to make the movie yet. Sellers arrived on set spoiling for a fight. The moment Medak arrived to meet with his star, Sellers hit him with a big ask. He felt that the producers should be fired. The problem? Medak didn't have the authority to fire them. In fact, the producers were the people who hired Medak. So Sellers fired them. After the first week of shooting was completed, Sellers went out to dinner with the director of photography, Larry Pizer. Now, Pizer was an old pal of Sellers, and the two had a great time together. The next morning, Pizer learned that Sellers had fired him. Still not satisfied, Sellers began peppering the film's executive producers back in London with letters dragging director Peter Medak, complaining that he was out of control and didn't know what he was doing. But Medak stayed on the film, so Sellers tried to organize the crew into, quite literally, a mutiny. Ironic for a pirate movie, to be sure. Sellers then clashed with his old pal Spike Milligan, because Spike Milligan refused to turn on Peter Medak. Sellers also hated his other co-star, Tony Franciosa, and at one point, echoing his Casino Royale complaint about Orson Welles, declared he would not share the set, much less a frame, with the actor. Sellers' character in the film was named Scratch, but Sellers' astrologer informed him that the name had satanic overtones, and Sellers then insisted that it be changed. Never mind the fact that they were halfway through the movie. Peter Medak was never fired. The film was eventually completed. Supposedly, there was a wrap party that no one attended. Medak worked overtime in an attempt to make some sense of the film, but when the finished product was shown to the executives back in London, it was decided that Ghost in the Noonday Sun should never see the light of day. This was not, for the record, the only Peter Sellers film from this period to suffer that fate. Peter Sellers was nearing rock bottom. He made bad movies that weren't released. He He made some good movies that didn't do well. He started doing TV commercials. He was adrift. And then he did what any major movie star who was in a career slump would do. He communicated with a long-dead music hall comedian. The comedian in question was named Dan Leno. And Leno had supposedly advised Sellers from beyond the grave before, so why not do it again? But if he did it, his advice was solid. Apparently, the ghost of Dan Leno told Peter Sellers, go back to the Pink Panther and play Inspector Clouseau again. So Sellers re-teamed with director Blake Edwards, and they made The Return of the Pink Panther. The film was a smash and put Sellers back on top. He followed it with The Pink Panther Strikes Again, another smash. Despite turning his career around, Sellers' mental state continued to decline. Blake Edwards said, regarding his work in The Pink Panther Strikes Again, if you went to an asylum and you described the first inmate you saw, that's what Peter had become. He was certifiable. Stephen Bach from United Artists said Sellers was deeply unbalanced, if not committable. Sellers got married, again, had a major heart attack, again, and played Inspector Clouseau, again, this time in 1978's Revenge of the Pink Panther. He didn't know it at the time, of course, but Peter Sellers only had 3 more films left in him. 2 duds and a diamond. 1979's The Prisoner of Zenda and 1980's The Fiendish Plot of Dr. Fu Manchu were the duds. But sandwiched in between them was Hal Ashby's Being There, based on a novel by Jerzy Kosinski, who also wrote the script. Sellers portrays Chauncey Gardner, a grown man with the mind of a child who loves nothing more than watching television. Yet, he is considered a brilliant sage by a group of very wealthy, very powerful movers and shakers. The film was a critical and box office smash and earned Sellers a well-deserved Oscar nomination. And then he made the terrible Fiendish Plot of Dr. Fu Manchu, and that movie sucked. Sellers' heart problems continued to plague him, and he finally suffered a final fatal heart attack in July of 1980. Peter Sellers' work will long outlive the stories of his tortured life off camera. He himself often claimed there was really no Peter Sellers. This was from his appearance on The Muppet Show.
Peter, what is this?
It was to have been, my dear Kermit. It was to have been a grand impersonation of Her late Majesty Queen Victoria.
I just love all your wild characters, Peter. But, backstage here, you can just relax and be yourself.
But that, you see, my dear Kermit, would be altogether impossible. I could never be myself.
Never yourself?
No. You see, there is no me. I do not exist. There used to be a me. But I had it surgically removed.
As we near the end of the calendar year, we take stock on the 2022 in retrospect, and which brought me to the year in film. And so I have imposed upon our film critic in residence, Katharine Coldiron. She has a new book coming out in May called Junk Film, and she has a terrific newsletter that you need to follow called the Fictator's Digest. All of this information can be brought to you if you follow her on Elon Musk's Twitter. Just search for Katharine Coldiron, Katharine, Cold Iron.
You wouldn't want to iron your clothes with a cold iron.
Cold iron, right. People's last names used to be derived from their occupations. Cooper was a barrel maker. Black was a blacksmith. Smith was also a blacksmith. Smithing was probably the direct one. Black was people who were knight. And It does make you wonder about Agnes Moorehead. But let's move on. So we were talking about what is interesting about the year in film is, people always talk about because of the corporatization of studios that all the films it's just Marvel. But this year had a bunch of excellent movies. And even if the movies weren't excellent, they were the thought behind them was terrific and unique and individual and really, really great. I saw some of the movies I saw this year, I would labeled as excellent.
Yeah. I think this year was really strong for A24.
Yes.
They had a banner year for movies. And, Barbarian, and I obviously can't call up any right now, but yes.
What was Black Phone A24?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, the sort of little artistic horror movies,
This was
Pearl.
Yeah, this year was one of the best years for horror films since the 80s, like the heyday of the 80s. There was a lot of really great. What did you think of Barbarian? Let's get right into Barbarian.
I really loved it, but it reminded me a lot of Psycho in the way that it kind of promises to be one movie and then it turns into a completely different movie.
Yep.
But it does it twice. It's like each plot point is an excuse to just start a new movie. And I really liked that about the movie. And I especially liked that our final girl sees this horrible situation and she just goes, not going in there. And that was great. They had to come up with a good reason for her to go into the horrible closet instead of just curiosity.
Yeah, no, I thought it was great. I knew that it wasn't going to be the first movie because it was just too obvious to me. But the second movie was very surprising. And I thought that was terrific.
Mm-hmm.
What I find interesting is, despite all of the horror film imagery in the movie, which was all great, the creepiest thing was drinking out of the bottle. To me, that was the one where I went, oh.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me to see feminism and women's perspectives kind of filter into horror film in the last 10 years or so, because it means that there are new avenues for stories to be told and for the grotesque to show, like different kinds of the grotesque are showing up.
Right.
And this is totally an example of that.
Yeah, it really was. And the fact of the matter is, when you really examine it, the villain of the film, quote unquote, is actually a victim.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. With Barbarian, there's a lot more going on than meets the eye.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to make a lot of good college papers in the years to come.
Yeah. Now, what was your opinion from Barbarian to Black Phone, which was the other?
I did not see Black Phone. I'm sorry.
I liked Black Phone more from a writing perspective. It's based on a Joe Hill story.
Okay.
And he certainly has inherited his father's storytelling muscles. And what I really loved about Black Phone was they use everything and nothing is wasted. Every little thing pays off.
Mm-hmm.
And just from a screenwriter's perspective, it was like looking at a beautifully made watch. It's like, oh, yeah, great. Nice. And it's it was very, and I didn't like that director's first film. I forget the name of it.
Let me look it up.
Also starred Ethan Hawke. He played a writer and he moved into a house where there had been a murder. And then his kids Let's look. I'll wait till you look it up.
Direction. Well, he directed Doctor Strange. Sinister?
Sinister. Yeah.
That one I didn't see either.
That's just, to me, Sinister is a lot of murder porn.
I'm not a fan of that kind of horror.
Neither. Yeah. No, to me, although, and Black Phone is a great example of this, it has to have a supernatural element for me.
Oh, really?
I don't like, but the supernatural element is in Black Phone is not what you think, which is great. But yeah, to me, I loved Barbarian, to which there's nothing really supernatural, but just in terms of, but like, I'm just, my personal feeling is I'm not a slasher film fan. Just, I don't get into like, that she got murdered in a hamburger machine. She got murdered with a steak knife. She got murdered with rat poison. Like, then I don't, doesn't do anything for me.
I love old fashioned slashers just because very often it's something about being comforted by the structure of it, like knowing exactly what the movie is that you're going to be watching. And then within that, somebody gets fed into a hamburger machine and I'm like, woohoo, buckets of gore thrown at the screen. Like that makes me happy.
Yeah.
But
I don't think there's anything wrong with them. It's just not it's like to me, it's like Springsteen. I know it's good. I don't own any of it.
I know just what you mean.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the movies that I watched this year was Gimme Shelter, which is the documentary about Altamont. And it reminded me exactly why I'm not a huge fan of the Rolling Stones. And it's because of that, because they do this thing that's this very standard structure and they don't really deviate from it. But yeah, the slasher formula for me is fun for that reason. And I'm going to say, I think Barbarian has a little bit of supernatural to it just because she doesn't die. Like there are all these moments where the barbarian definitely should have been dead, and instead she just gets up again, like Jason Voorhees, who really should be dead the 14th time he gets a nail through the head, but nope.
we were watching. I have a weird confession to make. I had never seen Halloween.
Oh. What'd you think?
I was an usher at the movie theater when it played. So I saw like the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes 400 times. And so every time people realized it, I'd be like, I kind of saw it, but I hadn't really seen it. So I finally sat down and watched it we had some people over. And one, it's slow by today's standards. It was slow, but what we thought would be so funny was when she gets him in the eye with a coat hanger. If he suddenly stopped and went like, "No, stop, I'm hurt. I'm really hurt right now. Can you call somebody? No, that really hurt. That this is like in the way that Peter Lorre, because the other movie I recently watched was like The Maltese Falcon, where Peter Lorre would pull a gun on you, or this isn't Casablanca, like he'll pull a gun on you and you'll slap it out of his hand and he goes, "You hurt my hand."
Oh, no fair. Time out.
He only cares about himself. My eyes really hurt. We have to stop.
Oh my gosh. I was a projectionist. I was a projectionist somewhere in the early aughts. No. And for that reason, I remember all of the movies that I ran during the time that I was a projectionist because I saw little pieces of them over and over. So I know just what you mean with the usher thing.
Once you've worked in a movie theater, there's always things like I'm always looking for the dots and those big copper rods.
Yeah.
Did you guys have those, or has projection technology progressed beyond those big copper rods?
Well, in the aughts, it hadn't. But now it has. I learned the hard way that the way they do it now is they have a file that they send to the theater. And so you can't, like, the way we used to do it is you would put the movie together and then you'd watch it on a Thursday night after closing just to make sure that you put all the reels in order.
Right, everything worked.
And I found out that they don't do that anymore. There's just like the studio sends you a file and then it's password protected and you can't get into the file until the day of release. And I was just like, are you kidding me? It's
Well, this is a good time for me to plug something that you should come to if you can.
Okay.
And it will lead us into what you did want to talk about that you were taunting me with prior to the show. On December 11th, 2022 is the 100th birthday of Mila Nurmi, who was Vampira, as we all know. And she has passed, regrettably, but we are going to have, at 3:00, we will be gathering at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery to lay a wreath. Thanks to Councilwoman Nithya Raman's office, we're going to get her a proclamation for Vampira Day in Los Angeles. And then we are going to the American Cinematheque, where at 7:00, we are showing a beautiful 35 millimeter print of Ed Wood.
Oh.
Then there will be a Q&A that I will moderate with Sandra Niemi, who is Mila's niece, who wrote the book Glamour Ghoul, V. Neal, who was the key makeup person on Ed Wood, Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, who wrote Ed Wood, and Ray Green, who made the documentary Vampira and Me. After the Q&A, Ray is going to be showing a 30-minute reel of Vampira's TV appearances in the 50s that she did a lot of, like stuff on the Red Skelton show and George Global show and things like that. And then we will be showing Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Oh my gosh.
That's December 11th at the American Cinematheque.
That is a banner day. What a great lineup.
Yeah. And just to give Mila her due. So that was good, which brings us to a movie that you recently watched. How did that even come up? Well, go ahead and tell. Because we first met when you wrote the monograph about Plan 9 from Outer Space for people that are unfamiliar. So.
And yes, and in the course of researching Ed Wood, I found out that a film had been made of a screenplay that he never directed called I Woke Up Early the Day I Died. And that film was made in 1998. And it had a freaky good cast, including your host, ladies and gentlemen. And it is not
everybody is in that movie.
Everybody's in this movie.
Yeah. Karen Black. Well, Mila's in it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I came to be in it. It's Billy Zane stars in it. Bud Cort is in it. Karen Black is in it. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah. Christina Ricci and I mean, I can't even.
And that was back when Christina Ricci was Christina Ricci.
Yes, that's true.
She wasn't dating edgelords.
This movie is not legally available. But I did.
Sounds like something from my filmography.
But I did get the opportunity to see it by means that I can only innocently claim were legal.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I thought it was. Go ahead, Dana.
Super. No, it's a super fun movie. And here's the thing: like we agree on this. I do not believe that Ed Wood was a genius. Like Elon Musk. He's not playing 4-dimensional chess. He's just making it up as he goes. But he was not a terrible idea guy. Like the plot of Plan 9, if you describe it, an alien race wants to attack the Earth by reanimating corpses and having them march on the Earth. You could sell that movie. Like, that's a legitimate idea. The execution is a beautiful atrocity, but the idea in and of itself is like, it's better than guy kills a bunch of stewardesses. You know, it's like, that's an idea.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's
and
true.
I Woke Up Early the Day I Died it's a funny idea. It's a funny idea.
I mean, yeah, I think it's sort of a mess. Like it's
a fever dream. It's a fever dream.
Yes, its narrative logic is not great, but it's but the way that it's made is great fun. And I was hugely surprised at Billy Zane having such a talent for silent film acting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
there's no dialogue in the movie. There's no dialogue in the movie.
But there is Foley, which is great. Like the fact that there are sound effects and things everywhere, but there's like little bits and pieces of dialogue here and there, like "hey" or whatever. But Billy Zane doesn't have any dialogue, even though he's in almost every shot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like My whole perspective on Nicolas Cage changed when my mentor explained that he was a silent film actor, and that's like how he goes about his craft. That made me see him in a whole new light. And I feel like that's what Billy Zane is doing, and that he's doing a different style of acting, and he's extremely skilled at it. He has a great face for it.
That is really interesting what you say about Nicolas Cage, who is in one of the best films I saw this year, which is The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that one to go on streaming because I want to see it too.
It's fantastic. I saw it on a plane.
Oh, worst way to see a movie.
But it was just one of those things. We went to Berlin on our honeymoon because, like all newlyweds, we really wanted to see where Hitler lived. No, we went to the Cinematheque in Berlin. It was fantastic. A lot of Herzog, but it was great. And then I just watched it on the plane on the way home, and it was a revelation. And then I watched it again. Like I got home and I had people over, like, you have to see this film. It's fantastic. It's so good. And yeah, the one thing that you realize when you watch this film is that Nicolas Cage knows what he's doing.
Yes, yeah. He does.
I sometimes wonder if Al Pacino still knows what he's doing.
I don't think so. Nicolas
Cage 100% knows what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And what you just said about him being a silent film actor does make sense.
Yeah, that kind of altered just not only the way that I saw his oddest performances, but also kind of the shape of his career made more sense to me after that.
Mm-hmm.
I just finished working on a project regarding the Coen brothers. And so I watched the beginning of Raising Arizona, which, anybody who's seen that movie knows that it's this incredible 11-minute opening of Nicolas Cage being amazing. And even back then, he had a sense.
It's a Warner Brothers cartoon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but
Frank
without
Tashlin
him,
could have directed that. Yeah, Well, he's Bugs Bunny. That's or he's really Wile E. Coyote. He's because he just gets abused the whole movie. It's a Warner Brothers cartoon, and it takes a lot of balls to give that performance and to make that movie.
Yes,
like you've got to no, I know what I'm doing. And
I felt that way the last time I saw Face Off, which will not go down in history as one of the great cinematic. It's not Bergman. But it's so much fun, and without his incredibly exuberant performance, there's no movie.
Yes, because I ended up watching Massive Talent because after going to the Herzog exhibit at the Cinematheque, I wanted to watch The Bad Lieutenant, New Orleans. It's Herzog directing Nicolas Cage and Val Kilmer. I was like, how did I not see that? Val Kilmer oddly subdued in that film. Nicolas Cage is all over the place, crazy, and as you said, it works.
Yeah,
it works. It really works. It's very admirable. What you said about your mentor pointing out that he's a silent film actor also addresses, and I'm not a fan of this performance, but Jack Nicholson in The Shining, where Stanley Kubrick's favorite actor was James Cagney, and he's thought that Nicholson was giving a Cagney-esque performance.
No.
Yeah. I don't think it works because I think we both agree with this. If you start on 9 and then go to 10, it's not much of an arc. I don't, well, if you disagree, that would be great. But I don't, the point is there was a thought behind it. Like they did think okay, then we're going to try to make this work.
There's a lot to say about this for me. I don't like Jack Nicholson. I don't enjoy him as a performer. And that makes studying the 70s and film very difficult, first of all.
That's true.
Also, I think that his work in The Shining is kind of playing on the thing that makes him unlikable. But I also think that he's not entirely aware of that. I think he's doing his usual persona performance where he's Jack Nicholson in a movie.
But I think that was really his first time really doing that. I think that was the first time.
I think you might be right.
That was the movie from which the Jack Nicholson impression was born. Like nobody does Jack Nicholson from 5 Easy Pieces. They always do him from, it's basically Batman and The Shining.
Well, he's kind of got the volume on in Chinatown, like a little bit.
Yeah.
His charisma is more powerful than the persona in Chinatown, but in The Shining, it isn't. And so I think Kubrick was taking advantage of that, but I don't think he holds a candle to Cagney. But I'm a huge Jim Cagney fan, so you won't hear that from me. He's not subtle, and Cagney is. Like, the way that he uses his hands in 30s movies is a lesson in itself in mime. And
I never thought about that before. I never thought about that before.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's this whole sequence of movies where he uses his hands almost too gracefully in the 30s. That is just amazing. Movies like, oh my gosh, what's the name of that movie? He's a bellboy. But also in Footlight Parade and, just the movies he did with Joan Blondell. They're amazing. And Nicholson is not doing that.
No, he's doing his own thing. And also there was a lot of, if you watch the behind the scenes, footage of that movie, it seemed to be a lot of Bolivian, a lot of people sniffing. Yeah. Okay. Ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, I think Kubrick is also playing on Nicholson's ego, and I don't know how you could do that without substances.
There's a really weird scene. If you just go on YouTube and look at the making of The Shining, there's Stanley Kubrick's daughter, who now is a crazy QAnon lunatic.
I know.
But she filmed some stuff, and it's funny because there's a take of, like Nicholson does a take, and Kubrick just goes, "Yeah, some of that was good at the beginning." And it's just like,
yeah, there's a great still that I love of David Lynch holding the megaphone to his mouth, and he says, the subtitle is, "Okay, let's do it again, but this time good."
I heard a great story from David Koechner, who worked on the 3rd season of Twin Peaks. Said at one point Jim Belushi kind of improvised a line, and David Lynch just said into the bullhorn, "James Belushi, do I need to send you to the principal's office?"
Classic.
But a great way of saying, don't do that.
Yes.
Don't do that.
Stop being a baby.
I put some thought into this. That's really, really funny. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask your opinion of Weird, the Alie Yankovic story.
A beautiful diamond. just gorgeous. Just good. One, I know Al, and Al Yankovic is a beautiful human being. He's the nicest, sweetest, generous, kind. Like he's one of those people that you just want to make him food. Like he's just so beautiful. And then to come up with that idea to tell that story that way, it was one of those movies where it not unlike The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I just felt so good after. I was like, I'm so glad they did that. That made me so happy. Yeah. What did you? Hopefully you agree.
I agree. I mean, my husband has been a Weird Al fan for decades, since he was a little boy, and was just not only happy and loving it and laughing, but also deeply moved at how kind and sweet it was. I admit I want like a full Nightline interview with Madonna about what she thinks of this movie. But I also feel like I'm dying to know if Daniel Radcliffe got his 8-pack just for this movie. Like, did he work out that hard?
I'm sure he did.
To play Weird Al. Like, I just thought that was great. And I mean, everything about it was wonderful in my view.
Yeah. And kudos to Daniel Radcliffe for getting it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think he and Elijah Wood are kind of fighting the good fight for weird little guys.
Yeah. Well put.
And I love that about him and them.
Yeah. No, I thought it was one of those movies that I just that I felt it was just beautiful. It was just, and again, like The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, I walked out going, and the best example being Ed Wood. It's like, to go back to Ed Wood, it's just like, how did this get made?
Mm-hmm.
How did you guys get to do this?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Somebody in a tie got it, which is rare.
Mm-hmm.
It gave me a lot of faith. Before we get into Everything Everywhere All at Once, let's go to the other biopic, Elvis. What did you think of Elvis?
Oh, I loved it. I give Baz Luhrmann a lot of leeway because he was very influential on Little Me.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked that he was the one to do a big, flashy Elvis biopic. Like, I don't think you could have chosen a better director for that unless he's gay. I thought Austin Butler was amazingly good, but he's still not sex on legs the way Elvis was.
Mm-hmm. It's really, again, you are literally playing somebody larger than life.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a Herculean task. It's like if you're playing Lennon or in any Beatles, like if you're going to play John Lennon or Paul McCartney, it's like, well, you're not going to be as charismatic as they are.
No.
Or playing Lenny Bruce or playing Muhammad Ali or it's just like, or Jim Morrison. I mean, I think Val Kilmer did a pretty great job.
Yeah, and I think Butler's performance is up there with Kilmer's, but I also think but Jim Morrison
wasn't nearly as charismatic as Elvis, and he's not burned. There's not a lot of footage of Jim Morrison just kind of like talking, and the stuff you have puts you to sleep.
Yeah.
Whereas we have Elvis, one of the most filmed human beings in the 20th century.
Totally.
So much.
Yeah. But I also, after I watched it, I rewatched Jailhouse Rock, which I remember I watched that in my 20s, and I was just like, I was astonished because I didn't grow up in an Elvis household. So my exposure to him was pretty limited. So when I saw Jailhouse Rock, I was like, holy crap. And when I watched it again, I had that same feeling of, this person is so vibrant and so animal.
Mm-hmm.
So
well put.
To see a real human being doing Elvis was like, he did his very, very best, but Elvis is Elvis. I thought it was
Kurt Russell was a good Elvis.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, that's a good match.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was really great. What did you think?
I did really enjoy.
Wait, one more thing. I thought Tom Hanks was awful. I love Tom Hanks, and I thought he was terrible.
Well, I was just going to say, I wanted to watch the movie Tom Hanks was in.
It was a different movie.
Yeah, and I actually think that would have been a better way to tell that story. To tell that story as like Raising Arizona, like is really like a larger, like a cartoon version of that story, just because everything was so lunatic.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been an interesting take on that story. Austin. Here's the weird thing about Austin Butler. He looks like a guy who had plastic surgery to look like Elvis, but he hasn't.
I agree.
There's something vaguely non-organic about his face. It looks like he did something, which he did not.
I think that's Luhrmann, honestly. Luhrmann's really, the way he shoots faces is really interesting. And I feel like that's, yeah.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. What was interesting was we went to watch it and it wasn't streaming yet. So instead we watched Viva Las Vegas. Now, here's the thing. And musicals are the best musicals are about grand themes. Like West Side Story, it's Romeo and Juliet, and the songs as a result reflect the theme. Like Tonight is about longing and love, and America is about the immigrant experience and being a stranger in a strange land. These are universal themes because the story is forbidden love, which is a huge human concept. The story of Viva Las Vegas is Elvis needs money to fix his car. That's the plot engine. And so the songs don't reflect the grand theme of the film. The songs are just like motor money. And like nothing.
No. Well, it's interesting. I did this really long essay about Cop Rock, the TV show. Cop Rock,
yeah, I know Cop Rock.
Which actually that essay is appearing in my forthcoming book, Junk Film from Castle Bridge Media, out in May. And this
Katharine
in this
Coldiron
essay
on Twitter.
Yes. In this essay, I argued that musicals only work when the songs are about emotional changes. So each song is about the characters going through something. And there was this guy on Twitter who wrote about the patterns of Disney musicals and how like the first song is Here's My Deal. And the second song is What I Want. And the third, and like each musical is engineered in a specific way. But I think all musicals have this pattern where if the songs aren't about the characters undergoing an emotional change of some kind, then the songs have no resonance and the musical ends up forgettable. And that's partly why Cop Rock was such a huge, there's so many reasons why it was a huge failure, but one of them is that the songs are about like details, or they're about the plot, or they're about, they're not about emotional changes for the most part. And so they fall flat and it's all meaningless.
Really well observed, and nothing I would have ever thought of myself. The point of a song in a musical and where and why is its own thing. And the other example would be I'll Say Anything, the Jim Brooks movie, where the songs were so crucial to the movie they ended up taking them all out. Which that in and of itself, there's got to be a book about that movie somewhere, about like how you make a musical and then you take all the songs out of the musical and you release the movie anyway.
The thing that I compared it to was the musical
of all the Albert Brooks musicals that the world has given us.
More Albert Brooks.
Yeah.
The world demands.
Nick Nolte and Albert Brooks singing.
The thing that I compared it to when I wrote about Cop Rock was the musical episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is really successful. And the reason is because all the songs are about emotional moments. And the fact that Joss Whedon was aware of this when he sat down to write this episode, but Stephen Bochco didn't understand this about musicals, is like, that's why the show sucks.
That's very interesting. Yeah, well, I know that Whedon is a huge Sondheim nut.
Oh, sure.
So that all tracks. And I don't know what Bochco knows about musicals. There's more to musicals than just at a certain point the characters sing.
Yes, there is.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, then to that end, let's talk about a movie that I have not seen. And I think it's technically a 2021 film.
Okay.
Cats. Go.
Oh my. I really enjoyed watching that movie. I did not have to take any substances whatsoever to feel the way that I felt when I was watching Cats. That is crazy.
Right. And I've never seen Cats. I haven't read the book. I haven't seen the musical. I have cats. That's enough. So the plot of the movie, from what I understand, or the plot of the musical, is just like, here's a cat, here's another cat, here's another cat, then there's this cat, then there's this cat. Like, there's really no plot.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much a kind of Here's My Deal musical, except every song is Here's My Deal. And I haven't seen the musical. I asked a bunch of people to tell me more about the musical after I saw the movie because I was so baffled. I couldn't. And they told me that, no, there's really no plot. The movie has a plot of a sort where the cats have to come together and vote on one cat to go to heaven. I know you're laughing, but it's true. That's the plot. And that's, and I say heaven, and it's called the Heaviside Layer in this show.
The Heaviside Layer?
Yes. Okay. I can't believe I'm explaining this. So
what's weird is they made a movie where Taylor Swift plays a character that poops in a box, and I haven't seen it.
You really should. It's an experience. And like, I don't know that I'll ever see it again.
Right.
But I mean, a movie in which Judi Dench and Ian McKellen both completely debase themselves. That's,
Yeah. I mean, what? Obviously, also because I have daughters, I'm very up on Tay Tay and what the ins and outs of the world of Tay Tay. What's interesting is she is not known for being associated with stinkers, and like in terms of like her, like that movie just never happened. Like it's just like. It's like with McCartney, it's like, give my regards to Broad Street. Nah, it never really happened.
I mean, yeah, it's a movie that aberrant. I think you can come back from if you're Taylor. It's just a weird, like, it's not even in the category that I think about when I think about bad movies. It's just completely out there. It's so strange and off-putting. And
I guess I have to see it. It just looks like such a job.
Yeah, have a drink available.
Yeah, it feels like hipster. It feels like homework, kind of.
Yeah.
Here, a movie I haven't seen that I want to see: 3,000 Years of Longing. Good, bad, indifferent.
I thought it was great. I did think.
I love. George Miller.
went to see it in the theater because it was George Miller, and when I saw Fury Road in the theater, that was like one of the better theater experiences I've had. So I didn't want to miss this one. And
Fury Road, as praised as it is, it's underrated.
Totally agree.
The fourth Mad Max movie is the best one. It is pretty impressive.
And this one is a lot messier. It's a lot. I mean, Fury Road is a straight line, and there's sort of no denying that. And this movie is more of a veer back and forth thing. And one of the major plot points I didn't really like or agree with, but it's one of those movies that reminds you that it's possible to have a singular artistic vision for a movie and fulfill it. And what comes out may not be your ideal experience, but it is the director's, and you just have to go along with it. So I thought it was...
That makes sense.
Yeah, I thought it was really beautiful. It didn't hold up against a movie that I really love called The Fall from 2006. Which it came and went and is not really available anymore. But it was directed by Tarsem Singh, who also directed The Cell.
Oh, okay.
And it has Lee Pace in it as I think maybe the sexiest character I've ever seen. But it kind of does the same deal of like a series of stories in very exotic places, that are all strung together by the glory of storytelling.
Right.
And The Fall is a lot more visually spectacular, I think, but 3,000 Years of Longing will do if you can't get The Fall.
It sort of, again, I haven't seen it yet, but it looked like almost like a Gilliam film.
Richer than that. Not as like depressing and crammed with stuff.
Right.
But like Munchausen, Gilliam.
That's what I was referring to, yeah.
Yeah.
Not Tideways or whatever that movie was.
Tideland. Oh, what a movie.
Didn't see it.
I would pass.
Yeah, and he made 2 movies that year, I think.
I still haven't seen the one with Christoph Waltz, but...
Right. I mean, I love him. I love him in theory, if not always in practice.
Yes. I have a lot of directors like that.
I'm looking at some of the list of the things that we want to talk about. Let's you have, I said, what have you seen? All the Star Wars TV. That's a lot. How many of you are there to fit in all of the Star Wars TV?
Well, I don't have a job, so I watch a lot of movies and television.
Right. What's good? What's bad? I have my own opinions.
Okay. Andor is good. Andor is so good that it is kind of reactivating the way I felt about Star Wars before the last few years of like too much Star Wars.
I have yet to start it. I had a big year. I had a lot of stuff to do. But everybody I know whose opinion I respect raves about Andor, which is basically a prequel to Rogue One, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. But it's essentially, it says, I'm gonna say something really risky here. It is as good as The Wire.
That's pretty risky.
In for a lot of the same reasons that The Wire is good.
Okay. That is high praise.
Yeah. And
I
so
don't doubt you. I don't doubt you. I respect your opinion more than my own.
The Book of Boba Fett is not good.
No, I didn't. That was one that I saw. It looked cheesy. There's nothing about it that I liked.
Well, the thing that I realized after I watched the first couple of episodes is, we as an audience think that we want more of the thing. Like, we think we want to know who killed Laura Palmer. We think we want more of Boba Fett and to know more about him. But we don't. We don't want to know that. We want to keep having that mystery strung out for us. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Right.
I really loved the first few episodes of Kenobi when it was just like sad Ewan McGregor sitting on Tatooine and like not able to do anything. I loved that. But once it became an adventure, for some reason, it just lost all of its zazz for me.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I mean, there's good stuff in it, and I'm glad I saw it. But I wish it had been different.
Yeah,
the Star Wars fan in me wishes that, and the film critic in me wishes that.
Yeah, the Book of Boba Fett underwhelmed me to the point that I didn't watch Kenobi, and then everybody said, "No, Andor, you should see." And then it was just like, again, it's just like time management. It's like
you're describing you're describing the trajectory of like every Star Wars fan right now is like they watched The Mandalorian. It was good. They watched Book of Boba Fett.
Mandalorian. I love The Mandalorian. It made me happy when I saw it.
Yeah, it's. I mean, as I reviewed it like really quickly recently, and it's much more. I mean, I knew it was a Western when I watched it. Like, there were so many ways that it leaned into being but it was even more a Western than I remembered, and that made it a real treat to kind of look back and look at it again.
Yeah, no, I thought, and that's the thing that they're kind of undoing, was that it always was, like the arc of the whole prequel arc is retconned of The Empire Strikes Back, where Anakin Skywalker appears to Luke as a Force ghost. That Darth Vader was not always Luke's father. They came up with it as how can we stop blowing up the Death Star? Well, what about this? All right. It's all, and it's why all the movies are just remakes, because there is no Tolkien-esque.
Well, yeah, definitely. The only guidebook is Joseph Campbell. So it's got to be about fathers.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's, And I mean,
but what it's good at is, to use that phrase again, retconning genres. Make a Western. Make a Western Star Wars. Which is The Mandalorian. Just use that universe to make a Western. What I would have loved Rogue One. I liked Rogue One a lot, but what I would have loved it to have been was the Dirty Dozen in Star Wars. Just make a spy movie and set it in that world. Make a detective movie and set it in that world.
Well, that's what Andor is.
That's what Andor apparently is. Yeah.
It's a spy thriller sort of set in that world, but it's also a defiant statement against fascism set in that world. Here's a fun thing. When I was in college, my film professor, there was only one film professor at my college, and she was trying to recruit me for her next semester's worth of classes. And she said, I'm teaching a science fiction class, and here are the films we're going to study. And I said, Star Wars isn't on here. And she said, Star Wars is a Western. And I was, 19, and I was like, my mind is blown.
Where'd you go to college?
Mount Holyoke in Western Massachusetts.
I went to UMass.
You did not.
I did.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
That's hilarious. I had no idea.
Yeah. So after that,
the 5 college bus system.
Yes, the 5 college consortium. Right. After that, every time I saw Star Wars, I noticed like more and more pieces of it being a Western, especially in Attack of the Clones, which is the only prequel that I watch with any regularity. There's a part where the cavalry comes in. There's a part where Jango Fett spins his blaster before he puts it away. And I have this vision of the showrunner of The Mandalorian coming into the writer's room and saying, okay, guys, so Star Wars is a Western. And then there's this like 5-minute break where everyone's like, whoa. And they just rejigger their whole plan for what they're going to write. And
those paintings they have over the credits, I mean, that's right out of that is Gunsmoke and Wild Wild West. And it just makes me happy. It's really, it's just really well done. I did not feel that the Book of Boba Fett had that. To me, it just looked crappy. It looked like Buck Rogers. It was just flat. It wasn't dirty. It just, I don't know why that didn't work, but it didn't. I hear Kenobi is better and that Andor is great.
Kenobi looks a lot worse. And I only say this because, I only say this with certainty because I scrubbed through every episode of all 4 series like 2 days ago. Because I made this video about landing shots and how there's a million shots of spaceships landing in, especially in The Mandalorian, but in all the shows except Andor. But Kenobi looks like shit. I'm sorry. It just does.
Did they want it to look like shit to match the prequels, which looked like shit? I mean, it was
different kind of looking like shit.
An aesthetic choice.
The aesthetic choice in Kenobi is the lights are off. And the aesthetic choice in the prequels is the lights are all on at complete full blast and everything is shiny.
Yeah, and everything is shiny. Yeah, everything is shiny. The dirty universe does not exist. TV is a great example of there's more of everything now, which means there's more crap, but there's also there's tons of great stuff. You just got to have to find it. And, one of the shows that you have on here that you watch that I am in full-throated agreement of, one of the best TV shows this year was Kids in the Hall.
Oh my God. I loved it so much.
And again, I know some of those guys really well and others not at all. But oddly, the 2 people you see naked, I know very well. And of those 2, it includes, and I know Scott very well. It includes the one that would be the most likely to be naked and the one that would be the least likely to be naked.
I know which one is the white face and which one is the red nose between those 2. So I think I can guess who's more likely to be naked.
Yes. But it's, again, it was like watching The Mandalorian. I was so happy. It's just so great. And to own the, and Frank Conniff posted the greatest thing on Instagram about the Kids in the Hall season 6 was that it is, I can tell you, and in the business, the business has made amazing strides in being inclusive and diversity to the point that ageism is now the only prejudice that is full-throatedly embraced. And that's what goes to those, well, you can't be, you're over 40, you can't be on this network. And it was such a finger, a finger to that, a middle finger to that, because it didn't matter. They owned it, they acknowledged it, they embraced it, and it was still hilarious and cutting edge and sketches about shit. And I just thought it was beautiful and great.
Yeah, I gave it a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
I mean, the sketch with Dave Foley just staring at the wall while Brand New Key plays, I swear, I've thought of that every week since I saw that episode.
Yep. That was
good.
That and the Shakespeare bust sketch. One of the greatest sketches of all time. Yeah.
I was amazed that I think maybe the secret to being excellent in all things may be just being Canadian. That was kind of what I learned from season 6 of Kids in the Hall. But I loved it.
I hope there's a season 7. It made me so very happy.
The feeling that you're talking about reminds me of this conversation I was in on Twitter not that long ago about, someone said, one of those dumb prompt tweets, what's a perfect movie? And I thought, well, the criteria of perfect movie is a whole different thing than a movie that makes you happy or a movie where you feel good walking out at the end of it. And the only one that I can think of that's both is Hot Fuzz, Edgar Wright's movie, because that is a perfect film. It is, ideal in every possible way. It hits all the marks. It's great. And when you walk away from it, you feel good about movies. But most of the movies where
I would say Ed Wood is the same thing.
Well, that's because you love Ed Wood, though.
Yeah. True. You don't need to love The Police to enjoy Hot Fuzz.
True. And I think the movies
Well, I went to see it. I love the cops.
Maybe we can just love British cops.
Yeah. And here's the weird thing about Hot Fuzz. You know who's so good in that movie?
Everyone?
Timothy Dalton.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he's so great. Yes.
He's the surprise.
Yes.
Because as James Bond, he is so aggressively non-charismatic. And it's like, you've been sitting on this?
Sorry, the thing I love about Hot Fuzz, it has literally 3 candidates for greatest gag of all time in like this one movie. How did that happen?
Yeah.
One of them is Timothy Dalton smiling next to the picture of Timothy Dalton on the wall.
Yeah.
But the movies that give me that kind of good, peaceful, all is right with the world feeling are almost never the perfect ones. Like I feel amazing about film after I watch Mulholland Drive. I feel like true serenity. But that is not a perfect film. It's a glorious mess.
Yeah. That's
yeah.
Planet 9 from Outer Space.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the people that say it's the worst movie ever made. It's like, no, Transformers 6 is the worst movie ever. You know, it's like, no, that movie makes me euphorically happy, and it is a series of train wrecks on a roller coaster that's on fire.
Yes.
It's whatever. Yeah, to talk about Timothy Dalton, like my favorite James Bond movie is not the best James Bond movie. You know, it's just like it's the one that makes me the happiest for whatever reason.
It's funny. One of my favorite movies ever is Casino Royale. And it's not because it's a Bond movie. It's just because it's a fucking great movie.
It's really not a Bond movie. It's such a good Bond movie. It's really not a Bond movie.
And because of that, I mean, but do I enjoy watching Moonraker more? A little bit. Because it's so bad.
See, my favorite one is You Only Live Twice. Just because it's so, but it also, you know, why do I love it so much? Because I remember watching it when I was 11.
Sure.
You know, just like, and recognizing actors from Godzilla. It's like, wait a minute, that guy.
So
what did you feel about No Time to Die?
Oh, I didn't like it. I don't want to talk about it.
I hated it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because there was a joke, I think it was on The Simpsons, where somebody said, I like that the James Bond movies now, he's not happy and he doesn't do any James Bond stuff. It's like, you just miss, it's like, we're going to make a Tarzan movie where he's a lawyer. It's like, no, you missed the point of the character at the end. And this was the same, and then I'll shut up about this. The same complaint that I had for Timothy Dalton, his take on the Bond was I went back to the books. They're not great literature. It's just a comic book for grown-ups.
Bold statement. I've liked the James Bond books that I read.
I love the James Bond books. I have them all. I read them assiduously. I will pick one up and read it. They're great. It's not a holy text.
Well, fair enough.
It's like, you know, it's pulp fiction.
Sure.
It's pulp fiction, which is great, and nothing wrong with it. There's no bigger fan than me. But it's not. It ain't Shakespeare. It ain't.
Yeah.
And to me, him dying, and I'm sorry if you haven't seen it by now. Tough luck. You miss the whole point of the character, which is that he always saves the day with a hat pin. You know, and
I think it depends on what you want out of your action movie, and you know how to make an action movie after 9/11 and how to make a James Bond movie after you acknowledge that women are people. And
that does throw a wrench into the works.
It does. You know, I mean, I think you and I disagree on Bond, but I also think that, like, for me, No Time to Die was bad because it was bloated and overpriced and undercooked. And the fact that it could make two people with completely different views on Bond equally unhappy, that's not a good movie.
I mean, had he lived, I would have thought, it's fine. It's a Bond movie. It's fine. But it's like a very special episode of Different Strokes where it's not really drama because you took the jokes out.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, this isn't a tragedy because he dies at the end. And his death was completely unnecessary. You can't
Yeah.
touch your wife and kid? Great. Now you have to live without being able to touch your wife and kid. It's actually more interesting to me.
It actually made me
The better
madder.
end of that movie was watching him watch them from a distance and not letting them know that he was alive to protect them from him would have been a much more tragic ending.
True.
And would
Actually,
allowed him.
Thought it was worse that he had a kid than that he died. Like, I thought that was less Bondy that he had a child, because
Don't argue that.
like, just didn't like it. Did not like.
Yeah. Wanted to like it. Love him. Love everybody about it. Just, yeah, I just don't, it was, remember the movie you're making.
Yeah.
Make the movie you're making.
That's a very good rule of thumb.
Yeah. Katharine Coldiron, follow her on Twitter and you'll get all you need. She wrote a brilliant monograph on Plan 9 from Outer Space. She has a new book coming out in May called Junk Film, and her newsletter, which is called
The Fictators Digest, and you're talking it up too much because all it is just news and updates from me. But please subscribe if you want to know more about my stuff.
You're smarter than I am about the stuff that I love. Katharine Coldiron, film critic in residence.
Other podcast reach for the sky. Dana Gould Hour.
We barely try.
This has been the Dana Gould Hour, brought to you by the Internet. Music by Andy Paley, with Jake Posner behind the board. Produced by Jeff Fox. Graphic design and web production by Spencer Hunt and Segan Friend. Sound editing and post-production by Jalinda Palmer and Joe Napolitano.
Hey, if you like the show, why don't you drop us a line at show@danagould.com. Tom Kenny speaking.
I'm a DJ, I'm a person, I'm a singer, I love to sing and DJ. Boom! Peace out. You want me? Peace out. Boom.